It starts with silence, broken only by the hum of voltage and the crunch of gravel under massive tires. A shape moves through the desert like a mirage, its angular body glinting against the sun, as if sculpted from equal parts nostalgia and audacity. This is not a memory. It's a return, a resurrection, a defiance of everything that once doomed it. Decades of criticism, mockery, and extinction couldn't keep it buried. What was once a symbol of excess has been reimagined for an era obsessed with efficiency, torque, and technological bravado. Beneath its towering frame lies a gamble, one that tests whether redemption can be engineered in kilowatts. Because when power meets purpose, the result isn't just a machine. It's a statement about how far an icon can evolve before it becomes something entirely new. The road ahead isn't forgiving, but neither is history. And that's exactly why this comeback matters. Like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments which legendary name you want us to dissect next. The GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 arrived with the kind of weight no spec sheet could measure, the burden of history. When General Motors announced that the Hummer name would return, not as a gas-guzzling brute, but as an all-electric super truck, the industry collectively held its breath. The Hummer EV was more than a product. It was a test of whether American excess could coexist with environmental responsibility. For a brand once synonymous with 10 miles per gallon, that idea bordered on contradiction. Yet GM's leadership saw opportunity and irony. The very qualities that made the old Hummer infamous could make the new one iconic if reframed through electrification. To understand how the GMC Hummer EV came to be, you have to rewind to the mid-2000s, when the original Hummer line crashed out of production amid rising fuel prices and a global recession. Its massive presence and unapologetic thirst for gasoline made it the perfect villain in a changing world. GM shuttered the brand in 2010, leaving behind a void and an image problem that seemed unsalvageable. A decade later, as the company bet billions on its Ultium battery platform, someone inside GM saw that dormant name as a Trojan horse. What if the Hummer could return not as a contradiction, but as proof of transformation? That question set off one of the boldest product reinventions in automotive history. From the beginning, the Hummer EV project wasn't about subtlety. Engineers were told to build something outrageous, something that would stop conversations and start them again in disbelief. The design brief leaned heavily into the legacy of the H1 and H2, wide fenders, squared lines, military posture. But now, every vent, panel, and lighting signature had to serve an electric purpose. The sealed underbody protected a massive Ultium battery pack. The roof panels came off to invite open-air adventure. The headlights doubled as a digital display spelling out Hummer EV when charging. Every detail announced, "This is not the old you remember, but it remembers you." Inside, the tone shifted from utilitarian to cinematic. The cabin blended rugged geometry with space-age tech, twin screens, crisp graphics, and even Easter eggs nodding to the moon landing, a metaphor GM leaned on heavily. The Hummer EV wasn't just a truck. It was a moonshot, both literally and metaphorically. GM's team wanted to communicate that this was an exploration of what trucks could become when freed from internal combustion. To that end, the powertrain numbers bordered on science fiction, up to 1,000 horsepower, 11,500 pound-feet of torque, a marketing interpretation, but still jaw-dropping, and a claimed 0 to 60 in around 3 seconds. The phrase "watts to freedom," GM's playful nod to ludicrous mode, summed it up. The Hummer EV could sprint like a supercar while weighing over 9,000 pounds. Yet the engineering feat wasn't just about acceleration. The truck's four-wheel steering introduced crab walk, a diagonal driving mode that let it move sideways, practically defying logic. Its adaptive air suspension could raise or lower several inches to clear obstacles or slip into aerodynamic glide, and its fast charging capability, up to 350 kilowatt-hours, made it one of the first EVs that could meaningfully recover hundreds of miles in minutes. Still, raw specs weren't enough to guarantee credibility. GM knew the Hummer EV had to sell a feeling, the sense that electrification didn't mean compromise. So the company framed it not as a virtue signal, but as an evolution of power itself. Ads emphasized strength, silence, and shock value rather than sustainability. The irony was almost poetic. The same marketing DNA that once celebrated excess now sold responsibility through spectacle. But building the Hummer EV wasn't just an image project, it was a logistical moonshot. The assembly line at Factory Zero in Detroit-Hamtramck became a showcase of GM's electric future, producing not just the Hummer EV, but later the Silverado EV and Cruise origin. For the company, this wasn't nostalgia. It was a stress test of its next-generation architecture, the Ultium platform that would underpin dozens of electric models across brands. The Hummer EV had to succeed not because of its name, but because the company's future depended on the technology inside it. Owners quickly learned that the Hummer EV was as complex as it was charismatic. Charging infrastructure in early 2021 still lagged behind GM's ambitions. Those bold 350 kilo claims required equally bold hardware in the real world. And the truck's sheer size, over 7 feet wide and nearly 9,000 pounds, posed challenges in everyday use. Yet for enthusiasts, those very extremes were the point. The Hummer EV wasn't built to blend in. It was built to stand out, to demonstrate that going green didn't mean going gentle. Its price tag reflected that mission. 6 figures for the Edition 1 launch model, a fully loaded statement piece for early adopters and collectors who wanted bragging rights in the electric arms race. What made the GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 fascinating wasn't just what it was, but what it represented, a paradox made real. It stood at the intersection of memory and momentum, of guilt and glory. The same company that once killed the Hummer now used it as a banner for redemption, betting that the world would embrace irony if it came wrapped in innovation. And somehow it worked. Early demand outstripped production. Reservation lists filled up. Social media flooded with clips of crab walk demonstrations and Watts to Freedom launches. The old punchline had become a headline again. The lesson was clear. If you want to change perception, sometimes you don't erase the past. You electrify it. That decision set the stage for what came next. The Hummer EV's collision with reality, competition, and a skeptical market that still wasn't sure if this rolling contradiction could actually define the future. That's where the next chapter begins. The GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 entered the real world with all the momentum of a moon landing and all the scrutiny of one. For every fan awed by its power, there was a skeptic ready to measure its weight, price, and practicality against its promise. In the months following its debut, the Hummer EV became a cultural Rorschach test. Some saw it as proof that American automakers could innovate with flair. Others saw it as a symbol of everything wrong with modern excess, now dressed in green. Yet regardless of opinion, the Hummer EV had already done something monumental. It made people talk about electric trucks as objects of desire, not compromise. When the first Edition 1 trucks rolled out of Factory Zero, they went straight to collectors, influencers, and early tech adopters who treated them as both trophy and experiment. Videos of the Hummer silently scaling boulders or launching to 60 in 3 seconds shattered old assumptions about what electric vehicles could do. The silence that once meant weakness now sounded like dominance. That shift, psychological more than mechanical, was exactly what GM wanted. The GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 represented a strategic bet that emotion sells technology. The company knew rational buyers would compare range, towing, and price per kilowatt hour. But emotional buyers, the ones who define brand reputation, wanted theater. They wanted something outrageous that said, "This is the future, but it still has a soul." The Hummer EV delivered on that stagecraft. Its illuminated grille and digital displays turned charging into ceremony. Its interior, filled with chunky switchgear and military cues, reminded drivers of the lineage without falling into parody. And that Watts to Freedom launch sequence, with seats vibrating and screens animating like a fighter jet, wasn't necessary. It was storytelling. Still, not everyone was convinced. Rivals, other manufacturers working on electric pickups, were quick to call out the contradictions. They offered practical work truck identities, longer ranges, and lower price points, questioning whether a 9,000-pound luxury machine really pushed the EV cause forward. Environmental critics noted that its battery pack alone weighed as much as some compact cars, but defenders countered that the Hummer EV was never about efficiency. It was about shifting perception. If you could turn the world's most notorious gas guzzler into an electric halo product, you could make electrification feel inevitable, even cool. And in that sense, the GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 became a marketing catalyst for GM's broader portfolio. The technology behind it, the Ultium battery cells, modular drive units, and scalable software, would underpin future Chevrolets, Cadillacs, and Buicks. The Hummer's shock value bought time and attention for the rest of the fleet. As the EV market matured, the Hummer EV's existence also reframed how Americans viewed capability. Electric torque proved addictive. Off-roaders discovered that instant power delivery made climbing, crawling, and rock hopping smoother than ever. The absence of engine noise highlighted the sounds of nature on trails once dominated by V8 echoes. Even seasoned off-road enthusiasts admitted that the electric format offered control combustion could never match. But the GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 also carried its flaws in plain sight. Its weight-limited range on rough terrain, its price placed it out of reach for most. Its charging appetite exposed the patchiness of US infrastructure. Early owners reported minor software quirks. Over-the-air updates solved many. But the message was clear. This was still the early frontier. And yet that frontier drew explorers. Enthusiast communities began forming around modifications, wraps, and even silent off-road meetups. Proof that the culture of the Hummer hadn't died, it had evolved. The aftermarket found new purpose, focusing on accessories like roof-mounted solar trickle chargers, custom overlanding racks, and portable power integration. The truck's onboard power export capabilities, enough to run tools, camps, or even another EV, gave it relevance beyond luxury. It was now part of a conversation about independence, resilience, and tech self-sufficiency. Meanwhile, GM leveraged the attention to refine its electric strategy. Lessons learned from the GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 fed directly into future models. Engineers improved weight distribution, cost optimization, and software refinement for the next wave of electric trucks. The Hummer EV's visibility also helped normalize the sight of electric off-roaders and heavy-duty EVs, paving the way for mainstream acceptance. On Wall Street and in showrooms, it acted as proof that GM could lead a transition rather than chase it. By 2023, the truck's popularity intersected with a broader shift. Electrification was no longer niche. Competing models entered the scene, each claiming to democratize the power the Hummer had made aspirational. But while others played for volume, the Hummer held its ground as a halo, an emotional anchor for the brand's electric identity. Its presence in pop culture, from films to celebrity garages, reaffirmed its symbolic weight. And through it all, GM remained consistent in messaging. This wasn't just a truck. It was a signpost for what's coming next. Yet the conversation about the GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 wasn't complete without addressing the bigger tension. How do you reconcile a vehicle this massive with a movement defined by sustainability? That question, polarizing as it was, became part of the Hummer's genius. By existing in contradiction, it forced audiences to engage with nuance. Not every EV would be small and efficient, and not every large vehicle had to be powered by gasoline. The Hummer EV made room for that gray zone, showing that change doesn't have to look like penance. It can look like progress even when wrapped in 35-inch tires. As time passed, the Hummer EV's reputation stabilized. The initial shock gave way to appreciation for its engineering audacity. Reviewers began to separate spectacle from substance, noting that its underpinnings, the Ultium architecture, were genuinely innovative. Owners praised its ride comfort, power delivery, and commanding presence. Detractors still rolled their eyes at its footprint, but few denied its role as a conversation starter that dragged the EV debate into truck country. By late 2024, production scaled up, and GM introduced the SUV variant, extending the line's relevance and usability. It was lighter, shorter, and arguably better balanced, showing that the brand could iterate quickly on its flagship. The story of the GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 thus became less about a single model and more about a proof of concept. GM had demonstrated that reinvention could sell, and that nostalgia, if harnessed correctly, could power an entirely new chapter. But the real test wasn't whether the Hummer EV could impress enthusiasts. It was whether it could influence the mindset of an entire market. And that brings us to its lasting impact. The legacy that would determine whether this bold resurrection becomes a blueprint or just a spectacular footnote. The GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 proved that a name once mocked for waste could become a symbol of innovation. But legacies aren't written in launch videos, they're forged in hindsight. As the dust settled on its first production years, the question shifted from whether the Hummer EV could impress to whether it could endure. In a market crowded with new electric trucks, from practical workhorses to futuristic exotics, the Hummer EV held a unique identity. It wasn't built for everyone. It was built for believers, for those who wanted to experience the absurdity of electric power taken to its logical extreme. That deliberate exclusivity gave the truck its mystique, but also its ceiling. The GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 became a cultural paradox, admired for its engineering, critiqued for its excess, yet respected for daring to exist. It embodied an important truth about the EV transition, that progress doesn't follow one path. Some brands chase mass affordability, others chase emotion. The Hummer EV chose the latter, and in doing so, it reframed what performance means in an electric age. Performance wasn't just numbers, it was theater, sensation, and intent. GM's engineers knew they were building something that wouldn't top efficiency charts, but they understood the power of aspiration. Every new technology needs a poster child, and the Hummer EV became that for the Ultium era. By wrapping bleeding-edge tech in a familiar silhouette, GM eased traditional truck buyers into a future they might otherwise resist. The Hummer EV wasn't preaching to the converted, it was converting the skeptical. Even as critics labeled it impractical, those same observers acknowledged that it expanded the EV conversation beyond city commuters to off-roaders, collectors, and status seekers. In that way, the GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 did more than move units, it moved expectations. The truck also left behind a technical legacy. Its multi-motor torque vectoring, adaptive air suspension, and 800-volt architecture became blueprints for later GM products. Features like crab walk and extract mode, once viewed as gimmicks, seeded innovations across the industry. Engineers studying off-road EVs began treating instant torque and independent wheel control as advantages, not liabilities. Even competitors quietly borrowed cues from its approach to digital interfaces, battery packaging, and over-the-air adaptability. The Hummer EV, in effect, was a rolling testbed that happened to wear an iconic badge. Yet the GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024's deeper impact wasn't technical, it was emotional. It proved that American automotive culture could evolve without losing its identity. For decades, power meant cubic inches and fuel economy sacrifices. The Hummer EV redefined that power as electrons harnessed with swagger. Its silence didn't diminish presence, it amplified it. Owners described the surreal feeling of commanding nearly 5 tons of machinery with nothing but a whisper and a push of torque. That emotional recalibration, feeling strength through sustainability, may be its greatest contribution to automotive history. Of course, legacy is never simple. As time passes, some will remember the Hummer EV as a triumph of branding, others as a spectacular indulgence. Both views can be true. What matters is that it forced progress to meet people where they were, through excitement, not guilt. By transforming the very image of the gas-guzzling giant into an electric pioneer, GM wrote a narrative that felt both redemptive and strategic. The Hummer EV's story teaches that technology alone doesn't change hearts. Stories do. And this one, powered by irony and ambition, managed to bridge the gap between nostalgia and necessity. Today, the GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 stands as a reference point, a high watermark for what happens when audacity meets innovation. It won't be remembered for efficiency charts or production numbers. It'll be remembered for proving that reinvention can look wild, loud, and unapologetically American, even when it hums instead of roars. That's the enduring mark of its resurrection. And as GM continues to evolve its lineup, the echoes of that audacious truck will ripple through every electric model that follows, ensuring that its story doesn't end with the last unit built, but with the next generation it inspired. For US buyers, the GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 remains a paradox you can park in your driveway. Its price still hovers well into 6 figures on the used market, especially for the limited edition 1 models that started it all. Availability is tight. Production volumes never met early reservation demand, and that scarcity fuels both collector interest and aftermarket premiums. For those considering ownership, reality checks are essential. Charging a 200 kilowatt-hour battery requires access to DC fast chargers capable of handling 350 kilowatts. Without that, home charging will feel glacial. Insurance and tire costs mirror its size, and its sheer mass means garage compatibility can be an adventure in itself. Yet reliability has been steadier than many expected. The Ultium platform's modular design has proven durable, and GM's over-the-air updates have resolved most early software quirks. Long-term maintenance, aside from wear items, is minimal compared to combustion trucks, a quiet benefit beneath the spectacle. For drivers who want to use the GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 beyond city limits, off-road performance remains its party trick. Crab walk and adaptive suspension make trail work almost effortless. Onboard power export turns it into a rolling generator for campsites or work sites. But the deeper satisfaction comes from the contrast. Watching a vehicle once condemned for waste glide silently through the landscape it was once accused of harming. That's the poetic closure GM aimed for. In legacy terms, the Hummer EV did more than rehabilitate a name. It changed the emotional vocabulary of electric vehicles. It proved that electrification could carry muscle, attitude, and cultural gravity without apology. It also gave GM a template for how to leverage nostalgia into technological momentum. The future models that follow, the Silverado EV, the electric Sierra, even Cadillac's off-road concepts, all owe a debt to this moonshot. For enthusiasts, the takeaway is clear. The GMC Hummer EV 2020-2024 wasn't built to save the planet single-handedly. It was built to prove that desire still matters in the age of electrons. And it succeeded. Because in the end, every revolution needs a flagship that dares to be excessive before progress becomes normal. The Hummer EV was that flagship. It didn't just return. It redefined what returning could mean.